What's up, guys? Meta here, coming at you with another retro deck profile. Today we're going to look at Jerome Baisey's Top 8 Shonen Jump Washington DC Warrior deck. September 2007 is often known as Perfect Circle format, kind of like you have Go format, Plan format, etc. So Perfect Circle was the best deck that actually won this event. Zombies were also really good this format, along with this deck, and Gadgets especially later on in the format when we got Deep Prison. For this format, it was the very beginning in September. So we didn't have Deep Prison, and we also didn't have Marshmallow, which was another good card that was used by Perfect Circle. So they were slightly neutered at that point. So we'll get right into the list. We'll start with the Warrior Engine. We have our two Don Zaloogs. Really good card to take cards out of our opponent's hand. It combines really well with the Mystic Tomato that we play as well. Picking cards out of your opponent's hand is just a really good mechanic. We also have one Warrior Lady and two DD Assailants. These cards are really good for putting pressure on your opponent. No, I'm not buying another secret. It's too expensive. That's a really good way to put pressure on your opponent, force them to kind of out it in different ways, force them to maybe burn like a Smashing Ground or something on that, which is actually really good in this format because Smashing Ground is limited to one. So if you can force them to use it on this card to not lose their monster, it's a really big plus for putting pressure on your opponent. And then the last Warrior, we had two Exiled Force. This card was limited in Go format, but we are able to play multiple copies here in September 07. This is a great way to pick off cards you have issues with. You do have a little bit of an issue, again, with only one Smashing Ground, no Dark Hole, things like that. You do have an issue of getting rid of bigger monsters, especially big Monarchs at 2,400, if you don't have your trap cards. So, good way to get rid of that. And it's, again, searchable removal. Good to get rid of set monsters as well. For the rest of the monsters here, we have a Tomato Engine. We have three Mystic Tomato. We can float with these into each other, and we can also get Sangan if there's anything that we need to search. Again, Sangan can also search Tomato. And then we also have one of Spirit Reaper. Again, another card that we can use with Tomato to get cards out of our opponent's hand. And it's a good way to stall out Hydro-Giddons from this format. Another interesting staple of the format, which I actually really enjoy, we have three Cyber Dragons. This card could create some really interesting interactions, especially in a format with no Chimera Tech Fortress Dragon, so you don't need to worry about your opponent contacting your Cyber Dragon out. It's completely safe on the board. But 2100 beat stick that you can summon for free. Really good for Monarch players because they could just plop that on the board, summon it kind of like they would a card like Spell Striker. Some more like standard generic stuff. We have one Breaker. Make sure we can pop back row. Again, we only have one space still. One Asura Priest. With Scapegoat at 1, Asura Priest job wasn't necessarily to clear Scapegoats. It can obviously clear the one of, but the big thing being 17, if your opponent put out a big Hydra-Giddon swarm of like 2 to 3 Hydra-Giddons, the fact that you could just, gun over all of them at the same time was really good, so that that card didn't feel as threatening, especially if you have this in your hand. And then the last monster, one Grandmole. I love Grandmole as a card. It's just a really fun card to use. So, one Grandmole. Searchable off Sangan if you need to out some big things. We have, for spells, we still are able to play 2 Reinforcement of the Army. So we have our 2 Rota to search out our Warrior package. A card that combines really well with Tomato. We have our 2 creature swaps and need to be able to maximize our Sangan value, maximize our Tomato value. This card is really cool with Cyber Dragon. A lot of times you can special Cyber Dragon to get rid of one of their weenies. So if they have 2 monsters on board and you want the big one, you can special your Cyber Dragon, clear out something that's small that they have laying around, maybe like a stray Treeborn Frog or something like that, because you don't want them to creature swap that. So you can use your Cyber Dragon to do that, and then normal summon your Tomato, your Sangan or something, and then give them that, and then you're able to plus off it eventually, which is kind of nice. Again, we have the limited removal cards, 1 Fissure and 1 Smashing Ground. Again, because these cards were limited, we also play 1 copy of Shrink, just to make sure that we don't have an issue with bigger monsters. Like I said, we do have a hard time getting over the 2,400 Monarchs, so this is kind of our way of circumventing that problem. A good way to reuse our Exiled Force, we have 1 Premature Burial. The one of limited Scapegoat, because we don't have Metamorphosis, this is just kind of an extra defensive card to put more monsters on the board, protect ourselves. This card was actually semi-limited at the time, but because we have a lower monster count, and because the Warrior Lady and the Assailants a lot of times will be banishing themselves, we don't really have the ability to get this card live as often. So just 1 Pot of Avarice. 2 Nox. This card actually wasn't seeing a ton of play at the time, but I really enjoy it, especially if your opponent has to set Disc Commander or Treeborn Frog. You can really catch them off guard, or if they think they're safe setting Sangan, things like that. This is kind of a out of left field card. They won't see it coming because we don't have a lot of flip monsters in the meta anymore. It's not like we're flipping Moths or anything like that. And then the last 2 spells of the decks, we have 1 Heavy Storm and then the limited Mystical Space Typhoon. Make sure we can clear everything. This is a Heavy Storm format, so yeah, we want to, don't make sure we're not setting too many cards in this format. We want to, keep it set to no Starlight Road or anything like that to protect ourselves. We have 2 Dust Tornadoes. Again, we only have 1 space. We want to make sure our plays go off. We want to make sure our warriors hit the field and then use them to control the game and control the board and make our opponent react to us. So this is a good card to do that. For battle traps, we have 1 Mirror Force and 2 Sakuretsu Armors. So for me, in terms of preference of this format, I prefer to play it up until Deep Prison before Phantom Darkness. Obviously, because then you just get Dad Return, and that's nobody wants to play against that unless you're a Dad Return fan or whatever. But decks like this, they just don't exist. It's the same reason when people play Edison format, because we don't want to deal with Infernities and X-Sabers and things like that. So if you do want to play this format and you want to play it the way that, at least my personal preference, and you don't want to do it historically, just replace these with Deep Prisons, because Deep Prison outclasses this card pretty much every way. I tried to look and see when this card eventually fell off and when there was no more need for it, and I actually found a list that won a Shonen Jump or OICS in 2010 that played 2 of this. It played Mirror Force, 3 Deep Prison, and 2 Sakus. I actually have that whole deck, so I will plan on profiling that at some point. I also do plan on profiling more from this format, especially there's a gadget list that I really, really enjoy from this format that gets a lot of benefit from Deep Prison. So 2 Sakus, and then the last 3 traps, we have 1 Call of the Haunted, only 1 Bottomless, and then, of course, 1 Torrential Tribute. Bottomless is really good against Monarchs, especially Ryza, because a lot of times they'll target set cards with their Ryza because they're bigger than your monsters. So you can just chain the Bottomless. You don't have to worry about it going back to the top of your deck. You don't have to worry about minusing really hard. And then you can get rid of the monster as well. So that's a really cool interaction. There will be some duels in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe for more retro format content. Thank you very much for helping us reach 500. And thanks for watching, guys.